Welcome to Ask Cadence, everybody. Thank you for downloading and listening this week. My name is Pete Wright. I'm sitting around the table here with John Patton. Again, John, hello.
Hello, Pete.
And Scott Lissit. Scott, welcome back.
Hi, Pete. Good to be here.
Excellent. So we have an issue that you're going to help introduce for us, Scott, and it's a very simple one that I'm going to read and let you fill in the blanks. What do you do when you're working on a project and your vendors are behind, unresponsive, or incompetent?
Well, that's a great question, Pete, and this is something that comes up many, many times when I'm out delivering seminars in project management. And I hear this from large companies and small companies, anybody who uses vendors. And a lot of companies do use vendors these days because they want to have the benefit of an outside specialist or expert taking on part of the project work. Now, when you do that, there are some guidelines that we're going to recommend. Number one is invite the vendor to become part of the core team. What that does is that allows them to be active participants in the planning of the project. Sometimes, if they're not involved in that planning and they're really kept at arm's length, then they don't see the big picture. They don't see what's happening on the project, and they don't know how to properly integrate their own work into the rest of the team's work. Now, keep in mind, if you do invite them to be on the core team, then they will see then everything that's being done on the project. And if that's okay, then this is a good strategy. One particular sticky area that people encounter is, what do you do with schedules? The vendor may have their own very detailed schedule for how they may design and manufacture or debug a certain product which they are contributing to the project. And the question is, should the project manager include that very detailed schedule in its entirety on the main schedule for the project? And my answer is no. Just imagine if a vendor had a 20,000 line schedule, very detailed activities. Do you really want that in your master schedule? No. However, you need to put some of the activities from that schedule, some of the milestones, some of the activities in the master schedule so that you understand what's happening, you can track their progress, and you can integrate your project team's activities with the work that's being done by the vendor.
I'm curious, Scott, what do you see? What is the tendency of project teams to? Do they include the schedule, the vendor schedules in their entirety, or do they not? What do you see in the space?
I see some of them trying to. And really then causing their master schedule to be unnecessarily long and complex. And then you find that it becomes unworkable because the team has to sort through so many tasks to figure out what they're supposed to be doing.
So you end up having to have enough to be able to maintain control, but not enough to overwhelm you.
Here you go. Yeah, all this conversation here reminds me of a very hot topic in project management today, and that's complexity. And complexity comes out of the merger between order and chaos. And you talk about complexity theory or chaos theory. So to get away from order, which is really just stalls the whole project because there's too much detail, you need empowerment. And we see extreme empowerment when the project team treats the vendor as a black box. And there are no milestones, there are no tracking mechanisms. And the project manager says to the vendor, how's it going? The vendor says, fine, until there's an oops on the delivery date. Now, at one end, to get away from making it unmanageable because you've complicated it so much with all this detail, you have to empower that vendor. But you got to have some control as well. So I would say you base the control and the detail that you have in the merged project plan on the past performance of that vendor. So if the vendor always delivers, and you can count on them, then I do milestones. And if it's a regular vendor, people that have a good reputation and we're using them for the first time, then I'd give them the same guidelines that I'd give other members of the team. Use our 3-week rule. Keep breaking tasks down until no task is longer than 3 weeks. But if, as in one case, we had the vendor was on probation with the company, then the vendor representatives is an integrated member of the core team, and their granularity, that is the shortest duration at the lowest level, subtask say level, is going to be shorter than 3 weeks.
Well,
because we want to watch them.
The phrase that comes to mind when you say that, John, is trust but verify.
Yes. Yeah,
which I know
heard that before.
Yeah, which I know comes from a political context. But if it's a good, solid vendor, you've worked with them before, trust, but schedule site visits, look for milestones that they're committing to achieve. Ask them to provide weekly project status reports. You really want to keep an eye on what's happening. But if they show that they're not dependable and they're not reliable and schedule starts to slip, you've got to really increase your oversight. You've got to visit more often. Maybe you want to put somebody on site there for extended periods of time, and you really got to tighten your control over them. And if that happens, now the project, I think, is in danger of going into crisis.
Yeah, I certainly agree. As their performance becomes more critical, the more you manage them. I certainly agree with Scott on the site visits and bringing not only yourself, the project manager, a technical expert, and even procurement, the people who wrote the contract with them. Now, before we leave this topic, though, I want to go into the prevention. How do you prevent this difficult relationship with a vendor?
Which is exactly what I have running through my head here, because it seems like everything we're talking about is a strategy to really help the vendor help themselves.
Yes.
To remove appearance of incompetence when clarity would help.
What we like to do in working with our customers is set up the best possible environment from the beginning, and that really is in contract negotiation. And there are 4 key clauses that we really require in a contract with a vendor. Number 1 requirement is that they name their project manager in the contract. So that name is there. Sometimes the salespeople in vendor environments land a contract not even knowing if we have the resources to carry it out. So we want them to name their focal point driver, their project manager. Number 2, that they will use our company's methodology. The client, they're the vendor, we're the buyer, so they're going to use our methodology. And if their people don't know our project management methodology, they're going to learn it.
Now that's an interesting one. Do you run into conflicts there? I would
Absolutely.
imagine, particularly the engineering and software development.
In contract negotiation, what we hear is we've never done that before, and we just say yes, I believe you.
Because they're afraid it's going to cost them money to send their people through training and time, and it's going to eat into the project.
Well, in one case, before I founded Cadence, I was working in a company. I paid for the training because I felt it was very important. Now, number 3 is that they will provide the level of detail in scheduling that we request. And see, if you don't get that in the contract ahead of time, it's sometimes really hard to pull it out of them. And then number 4, that they'll come to status meetings with the frequency with which we request. That 4th one is the only one which is easy to do, to get, because they'll bill us for attending those meetings. But, that's talking sort of in an adversarial relationship, and I really don't want to apply that. But we have to have the contact.
John, can I add a 5th?
Sure. I'm open. I got my pen out and ready to write.
I like adding incentive clauses to contracts with vendors that rewards them for on-time performance or even exceeding performance. So if they deliver on time or if they deliver early, then they get a bonus.
Do you balance that with penalties for being late?
Well, I think you can, yes.
If you can get away with it,
Yeah.
it's certainly
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, so it's
Common in construction.
And that's using both the carrot and the stick approach. Mm-hmm. One thing also that is important is if the vendor project manager is not performing well, you need to be able to ask the vendor to replace that project manager. So we said we were going to put into the contract that we wanted them to identify beforehand who their project manager was, and the caveat that I would add to that is that once it's underway, if they are performing well, terrific. If they're not performing well, we want to be able to have some influence.
And that starts to open up a whole new specter, because we certainly want them not to change out the project manager if that project manager is working well for us.
Yeah, good.
And we want the ability to ask them to change out the project manager if they're not working well for us.
Yeah. Yeah, see, we need to remember we're the customer.
Yeah.
We're the customer, and we have the right to request as many of these things as the vendor will agree to.
However, there's got to be some balance in there, because I've been on the other end where the buyer has been, pretty high-handed. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to take something and insist on it, we got to be ready to give something as well.
Yeah, good.
Because the end objective really is to create a mutually beneficial relationship. Absolutely. And all of these strategies.
Let's always remember that a contract documents our understanding, and that's why we're doing it. We're not preparing for litigation. We're documenting our understanding.
That's a great framework.
And if we do this right up front, then we really increase the odds of having a smooth, well-functioning team. And that's our goal.
Thank you for listening, everybody, to another episode of Ask Cadence. Have a happy new year. We will be. You will hear from us again after the break, and we will rejoin you with Ask Cadence in 2009.
It's been a great year, Pete. Thank you.
Indeed it has.
Thanks,
Chance.